play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining us. Got a great show today. Of course, we have our normal Geek News segment, which we'll make it brief today, or as I always try to do, because I got a real cool guest. We've got Charles M. Ryan from Monte Games on today. He was kind enough to give us some time on Labor Day weekend to talk about this crazy new Invisible Sun tabletop role-playing game that Monte Games is doing. Of course, they've been very innovative with their Numenera and Cypher system and the Strange and all that. So this is taking it to another level, trust me. I'll introduce Charles here in a second. First, let me do some housekeeping notes. Don't forget, this is live Geek Talk Radio. It's talk radio just like sports radio or religious radio or political or any of that, but it's Geek Talk Radio. We talk about games and comic books and movies and Star Trek and Doctor Who, whatever. It's geeky. So if it's geeky, it goes here on Shane Plays. So with it being talk radio, and there's nothing wrong with podcasts. I love podcasts. This show will go out later, pre-recorded as a podcast. But while it's live, you can participate. That's one of the reasons that I do it. So sometimes we get calls, sometimes we don't. We have a good show either way. But if you want to call, you can call 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. Or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. Shane Plays. So tweet me or call 501-823-0965. And I will do my best to get your question or comment on the air. You can also ask a question of Charles about Invisible Sun. Check that out. So show notes for today's show and all of the archive shows are on shaneplays.com right now, ShanePlays.com. And that's got the links for the news items today, as well as links for Monte Games and the Invisible Sun Kickstarter. It's got a bio on there for Charles M. Ryan. So if you want to know more while you're listening to the show, or if you missed something we said, go there and you can get links to what we're talking about. As I mentioned, the show does go out as a podcast. It'll go out in a couple of days. It's been making it Wednesday or Thursday here lately. Sometimes it makes it out sooner. It goes out on my blog at shaneplays.com. It goes out on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher. I think we're on the iHeartRadio podcast network now. Just got a notification of that. And of course, I put it up on YouTube at youtube.com/GoShanePlays. Most people listen to it as a podcast, but some people do seem to prefer to listen to it on YouTube. Last, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. We're always a week delayed on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is SciFi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. All right, with all those housekeeping notes out of the way, I want to introduce our guest for today, Charles Ryan. Charles, welcome to Shane Plays.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Due to the wondrously wonderful technology of Skype, you are joining us and our listeners live. Like I said, if anybody wants to call in, you can call 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. And if Charles, if you get any tweets during this and want to bring them up, that's fine too. Sometimes people tweet the guests directly. Do you go for your official? I guess when you're doing official Monte Games stuff, do you just go by Charles? Do you want to be Charles M. Ryan? Like how do you want to be referred to? What's your preference?
Charles is just fine.
Charles is just fine. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So
Twitter handle was Charles M. Ryan.
Yeah. I gotcha. All right. And I want to mention, we'll get into your bio here a little bit later. When it comes to role-playing games, you've got quite a history. At one time, you were the D&D brand manager, if I'm understanding correctly.
That is, in fact, correct.
Yeah. So you've got cred. You've got cred in the role-playing game, not to mention the fact that you're, the COO for Monte Games, who, of course, is putting out some great stuff. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a quick news segment, and then we're going to, after that, we'll take a break, and then we will jump into all Invisible Sun RPG, which is just really fascinating. I've never seen a role-playing game quite like it. So, Zach, why don't you turn on the microphone and see if the news team's working on Labor Day weekend. There they go. Wow. Hard working. All right. So first up is we've got, I don't know if you remember, we had a few weeks ago, we were talking about Project Small Access, who they were doing their best to find a positive way, not a negative way, not a boycott, not any of that, but a positive way to talk with CBS and Paramount about their fan film guidelines that they issued a few weeks back. Well, and again, this news story I'm throwing out there is not to editorialize on whether the fan film guidelines are good or bad. The reason I had Project Access on, and the reason that I'm sharing this news item, is because I like how they are trying to find a positive way to interact with CBS and Paramount about something that they don't like. They don't like how they did the fan film guidelines. So if you go to the show notes, there's a link to or from Fan Film Factor, which covers these fan guidelines a lot, and Star Trek Action R log that. And there's a Star Trek Fan Films Guideline Response fan film letter writing campaign. So I just want to make sure people knew about that. And what they're actually doing is they're for people who want to express their opinion to Paramount. They're not saying, hey, we're going to do a boycott. You got to do our way or the highway into that. They're just saying, hey, here's some sort of notes we have about, we think half the guidelines are fine. A couple of them just need to be tweaked. And there's a couple that we're just really uncomfortable about as fans. And fans have been very important to Star Trek. So you can go there, print these things out, and they give you some addresses that people can send to. If you're one of those people out there that does not like the fan film guidelines, I encourage you to search, because they're doing it in a very positive, professional, respectful way. This isn't, some hate campaign or boycott or something like that. So just want to make sure people knew about that as a follow-up to having Project Small Access on the show a couple of months ago. Hey, Charles, I'm not trying to get you in anything you don't want to talk about, but do you have a dog in a hunt either way on Star Trek, or are you a Star Trek fan?
I am a fan. My wife, Tammy, and the kids and I watched the entire original series all the way through. We just finished up a few months ago.
Yeah.
But in terms of a dog in the fight in this particular issue, I am not I'm right. Not well informed on this.
Totally understand. Yeah. Their fan films are becoming more and more common, and the quality is getting better and better and better. So CBS and Paramount, issued some guidelines that said, if you follow these, we won't sue you for using our property. But you can't hardly do anything with them. They're very restrictive, and some people, are pretty unhappy about that. So, but anyway,
I love the fact that they take that stand too. It's sort of like what we do with our fan use policy at MCG. The idea that, you're recognizing that this stuff is out there, and instead of staying in the 20th century and trying to say, no, we own this, and anything you do with it, we perceive as a challenge. I think it's great they've taken that step, but clearly there's some room to evolve, I'm guessing. Yeah,
well, we'll see how it works out. I just think that Project Small Access, they have a very positive, professional, mature approach to it. So we'll see how it works out. Next news item, the new World of Warcraft level cap hit in less than 6 hours, and this is from Gamespot. And in 5.5 hours, I don't know if you follow World of Warcraft or not, Charles, but the new expansion Legion came out. And I guess they maxed the level cap to 110 from 100. So within 5.5 hours, somebody already hit the new level cap, already hit the 10 level new cap. That just amazes me. Now, evidently there was some prep to do this, and somebody had help and all that, but still, in less than 6 hours, people have been waiting on this expansion forever, and somebody's already gobbled down the whole meal. So I don't know. Anyway, are you into MMOs at all?
I do not play Warcraft. I'm not a big MMO player, but it kind of reminds me of like when Magic first came out, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the things that Garfield talked about as being one of his goals was this idea that you could play a game and you're playing with somebody, and then somebody plays a card that you've never seen before, you've never heard before, and so there's this sense of wonder and new things that come about. And very quickly we were proved that that's not going to happen, right? That the hardcore players are going to pounce on a set.
Right.
The day it comes out, they're buying it by the case.
Right. Yeah. They're buying everything, snapping it up until they get the complete set on the first day it comes out. Yeah. Well, it just shows World of Warcraft is a very powerful game in terms of its reach and player base. You know, people are like, oh, it's been bleeding players. It still has millions of players. I mean, this is still a very big game. You know, just because it's not as its peak of 6 or 7 million, I think it's down to like 4 or 5 million. That's still huge numbers. You know, there are a lot of people that are way into this game. So anyway, another reason these stories always grab my attention, you know, because I'm in my early 40s now, you know, have a family, you know, who has the time, right? You see all these crazy, like so-and-so did a speed run in 3 seconds. I mean, who has the time to do all that? I guess you're lucky in that you get to play games. And I know you don't just sit around at work and play games all day. I get that. But I guess you get to scratch your itch a little bit at work. Do you get to play a little bit?
We are, you know, I mean, we're definitely a gaming family, and we're also in terms of within our household. And then we are also a gaming company, but we're distributed, right? So we've got people in different places. So we have this policy of getting together a couple times a month via Skype and playing a game, but we do not succeed in enacting that policy as often as we fail, perhaps, particularly in the summer when we have Gen Con and everything else going on. It's probably been about 6 or 8 weeks since the last time we played, but I mean, I kind of wish it was the life we all imagine that being involved in the games industry is. But I mean, it is true that we are steeped in it, and we do it, and we all love it. And we all do it because we love it. Right.
Well, there's, you know, with everything, like people are like, oh, I love comic books, or I love movies, or I love games. If you get into the business of it, it's a business, you know.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a work side to it. So we're glad there's people out there that tackle that challenge. So next news item here, and this is from Polygon. And it's interesting, you know, a couple of the what's been in the news a lot lately, and 2 of the news items today talk about protecting IP. Nintendo slapped Metroid 2 remake, which we already knew about this a while back, and 500 plus other fan games with takedown orders. So Nintendo is getting really aggressive about contacting servers that are hosting fan-made games that use their characters. For example, there's a game here where Mario and Luigi versus the Furbies. I'm not making this up. This is one of the games that said, hey, can you please take that down? And it comes back. You know, it's funny, Charles. I'm pretty sure that we had a news article like this when Shauna Germain was on talking about No Thank You Evil. And, you know, we talked about that delicate line that you have to walk between making something creative that fans love, but also protecting your property, because that is property that you've invested time and this and that too. So it's a very hard line to walk, I imagine, when you have passionate fans.
You know, it is. And one of the things that's, I don't know, really tricky about it on both sides of the equation, because I mean, as a guy who works on entertainment properties, right? That's what role-playing games are. You know, it's never fun to tell somebody they can't do something. We never like to, you know, so it's like running a role-playing game when you're GMing, you know, you never want to say no, right?
Right.
But the way the law works is that if you don't protect your ownership of things, then the law says you don't own it.
Right.
Right. And so sometimes companies, you hear about these sort of like ridiculous cease and desists, and it's because they've done a little look at the legalities of it and said, you know, if we don't do that,
right.
And I'm not speaking specifically to Nintendo's situation because I don't know any of the specifics.
Exactly. And I don't want to,
where if they don't do that, then they risk the very real possibility that they could go into court about a serious major violation that costs them money, and the courts could decide, you know what, you don't own Mario or Luigi.
Yeah, because you didn't protect it the last 3 times or whatever.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I understand. I don't want to put you in the position where I want to clarify again for listeners. These are just news items, and Charles and I are speculating in a very general manner. We're not speculating on the legal merits of any of these news items, but it is interesting because this seems to be happening more and more, the intersection of, especially with the internet and people just doing all this amazing stuff and throwing it out on the internet, of the intersection of the legal system and fandom. So, all right, last news item. We're going to take a break after this, and then we'll come back and talk about Invisible Sun, this just amazing, mind-blowing new leap in what role-playing games are. Just really mind-blowing the more I look at it. But last article I have here, and this is from Cinemablend, last news item, is the BBC is going to revive some Doctor Who episodes through animation. Now, they've tinkered with this a little bit in the past, where they had a William Hartnell serial that they lost a couple of the episodes, but they didn't lose the entire story arc. So it would transition between live action and animation. But in this case, there is the very first. Now, first of all, Charles, are you a Doctor Who fan?
Doctor Who never put its hooks into me. My son really enjoys Doctor Who, but I've never been a particular fan. All
right. Well, evidently, what they're doing is sort of one of the holy grails of Doctor Who fandom. And I like New Who, but I'm a big fan of classic Who as well. Mm-hmm. So I love it when they do stuff like this. Now, what they're doing is the very first full storyline that had, I think it's Patrick Troughton, who is the second Doctor. The very first storyline that had him in it after the first Doctor regenerated into him was lost because the BBC purged a lot of, they needed, like, hey, we need to use this videotape or whatever. So they purged all these classic episodes of all these TV shows of theirs. And so they have the audio, but they don't have the video. So there's a storyline that was first aired between November 6, 1966 and December 10th, 1966 called The Power of the Daleks. And they're going to completely animate it. And the style, I've seen them do some of it, and it looks pretty good. So obviously we would rather have the original complete, actual broadcast, but this is the next best thing. And people are getting very excited about that. So if you're a Doctor Who fan and you haven't heard about that, they have commissioned a company to do this. I don't know when it's supposed to be out. I don't see that in the news article. But they're working on it. So hopefully we'll get to see the very first serial, the full serial with Patrick Troughton in it, who was the second Doctor, and of course the Daleks, which who doesn't love the Daleks? I mean, who doesn't want to be menaced by salt and pepper shakers? So, all right, moving on. We're gonna take a break. When we come back, Charles, we're gonna talk about Invisible Sun. We're gonna dig into it. Thanks for hanging through the news segment. I'm gonna throw some love at a sponsor real quick. We'll cut to a short break. When we get back, Charles M. Ryan from Monte Cook Games talking about Invisible Sun, their innovative and just mind-blowing new RPG that they're putting together right now via Kickstarter. So meanwhile, in Hot Springs, SpaCon lands in the Spa City September 23rd through 25th at the Hot Springs Convention Center. Come out and celebrate your love of comics, science fiction, anime, cosplay, gaming, pop culture, and all things entertainment. SpaCon is a full-fledged comic convention complete with celebrity guests, vendors selling their wares, comic books or comic book artists, panel discussions featuring special guests, cosplayers, and so much more. To find out more about SpaCon, including a full schedule of guests and events, or to purchase tickets, visit www.spa, that's SPA-con, SPA-con.org. Zach, don't take me to a break just yet. I want to tell Charles, Charles, there's going to be a lot of organized role-playing at this convention, and I'm running Numenera. So,
sweet.
Yeah, I ran, there's already a lot of D&D and Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. And at these conventions, I like to run stuff that isn't already being run. And there was a convention a couple of months ago that I ran Numenera at, and it booked up. Both of my sessions booked up. And I used that book that you guys put out, that it's like 10 short adventures for Numenera that are low prep.
Yeah,
and
Weird Discoveries.
Amazing. I mean, you can literally pick that up, look it over, sit down and run a full adventure that everybody enjoys.
I think that Monte hit it out of the park with that one. That is like one of the, like the secret, it's a sleeper, I guess. And people don't realize how much it changes, like how you go about running an adventure, and prepping, where you just sit down and do it, right?
Yeah.
You don't spend hours getting ready for it.
It was amazing. And I ran 2 groups through it, and they both enjoyed it very much. And I'm looking forward to running Numenera again at SpaCon on the weekend of September 23rd through 25th. So anyway, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Charles about Invisible Sun. Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net.
The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate Battle of the Galaxies. Grab your slot today for the only online game where tactics and strategy still reign supreme. Visit megawars.net and get options only available in our special pre-sales previews running now.
Megawars.net.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays. Hey, we're back. Welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into things we love. I'm joined by Charles Ryan with Monte Cook Games. We're going to talk about Invisible Sun. I've never seen an RPG quite like this, so I'm looking forward to talking to him about this. Remember, this is Live Talk Radio. If you'd like, you can call in at 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. All right, so Charles, we got the news segment over and done with. I want to talk about this game. I don't even know where to start. This thing is so crazy, and I mean that in a good way. So, when people are going, what's this Invisible Sun RPG? How, as Monte Cook Games, like, what's your elevator pitch on this? How are you all describing this?
Yeah, I was afraid of those words because
oh, well, you know. Okay, let me take that back. I'm going to cast a incantation and take that back. A one-use power from Invisible Sun. Just tell us about the game.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so it kind of defies the elevator pitch a little bit. So I apologize if I'm a bit wordy.
Yeah. Don't worry about
Invisible Sun is a role playing game, and I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of weird stuff right now. But I want to say that at its core, it is still a role playing game. If you sit around the table with 5 of your friends and GM's running it and all the things you expect, but this is a game that Monte has been mulling over for years, right? Or it's a culmination of several concepts that Monte's been mulling over for years and years. And he's sort of bringing it to fruition now. And part of what makes this campaign so wild and different and unique is that, through all of this, rumination over what this game is going to be, Monte just doesn't want to be constrained by anything. He doesn't want to cut any corners on the quality. He doesn't want to cut any corners. He doesn't want to, make it a 416-page book because that's what RPGs are. He wants to make exactly the experience that he had in mind. So I think there's three things that set the game apart from, or that sort of define, what it is. first and foremost, these things are all sort of equal. So one of them is the setting. It is a surreal fantasy setting. The world that we live in, if you look around you right now, and I'm sitting in my office and I'm looking at the wall planner on the calendar and the computer that I'm talking into and my phone sitting on the desk and all these things, this is all shadow. This is not the reality, a true reality. What this is the land of the gray sun. It's called Shadow, but there are 7 other suns in a path of suns, and you can think of these almost as different dimensions or whatnot. It's not as though 7 suns are shining on the same thing. It's 7 different worlds, 7 different realities. In addition to Shadow, and these are called the actuality, the things that are real. And the one that is adjacent to us, upstream of us on the path of suns, is Indigo. Indigo is the home of Satyrine, which is sort of the city that is the primary setting of the game. And you and I are Vizsla. We are people from the actuality, from Indigo, who have just returned. So this game is not about escaping our world. The game is actually set outside of our world. We have just recently returned to Indigo.
So it's set one sun away, as it were, one dimension away?
Exactly. And we were refugees. We had gone to Shadow for a reason. The reason was that there was a horrible war in Indigo. And living in Shadow, which is essentially a world of lies or falsehoods or things that are not real, unreality, we have forgotten the actuality. And so we have come back to the actuality and to be clear, our characters are natives of that place, and we live there, and that's who we are. But we retain our memories, or we are all recent returnees from Shadow. So in some ways, despite the fact that my apologies, my phone.
Yeah, no worries.
In some ways, despite the fact that we're natives to that, we as characters are exploring this world in the same way that the players are. We're rediscovering this world, and so it's a surreal fantasy world. This is a world where anything that you can imagine can be real. It's very magic driven, but it's not just magical. It's not just fantasy. It really is about the malleability of reality. It's about uncovering secrets that can change reality. It's about transformation. And so, it's a lot more like being in a Salvador Dali painting than being in a Tolkien style fantasy.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Well, that was, more and more, especially with like Numenera and, The Strange and this game. And then other companies are putting out fantasy that is not traditional, medieval / Tolkien-ish fantasy. That was one of the things as I was researching this game, more and more, you can't just say, well, it's a fantasy game. Because used to fantasy, and for me, because I grew up, playing D&D and all that, of course, in the early 80s on. When you said fantasy, it was Tolkien, basically, something Tolkien-ish. But, you've got Numenera, you've got the game that they're working on within Exile, Torment Tides of Numenera, you've got this, you've got, Cypher System. Fantasy, it really is starting in a role-playing game context to mean something very different.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
I think that there's, who doesn't love that sort of Western medieval Tolkien-inspired fantasy, right? I mean, I started playing D&D in 1979. That's where I read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbits and in the 70s and 80s, and we all love it, but there's a million places you can get that, right?
Right.
And including, run a fantasy game based on the Cypher system, right? So we even give you that, but I think that, it's,
Well, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's okay to have alternatives too. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the traditional dungeon crawl. If I'm in the right mood, that's exactly what I want. But
absolutely.
But this sort of thing is not, when we say fantasy and when we say magic, this is different. This is not, I've memorized, magic missile, and I'm going to, this is not, we're talking about way different stuff. So
I think that's another aspect of the setting or of Monte's sort of thinking that he wanted to bring into it is the idea that finding a way to make magic feel magical, because ultimately magic in RPGs feels mechanical, right?
Right.
Whether it's memorizing a spell list or the many other ways that it's been done, the whole nature of RPG mechanics is that they create a system, right? Do A, B, C, and you get result D, and that's the nature of the beast. And all over the map of how that's accomplished. I played for a long time. I played Ars Magica. I love that game, and it had an element to it that felt very magical. That you could invent your own spells on the fly and find ways to combat and connect different categories of magic to create the effects you were looking for. So I mean, this is not a new quest, but I think that was another big thing that it was an inspiration for this game.
Well, and that was one of the things in the Kickstarter. The description says Invisible Sun makes magic magical again. Mm-hmm. Magic is not just a series of mechanics. It's weird, wonderful, unpredictable, and dangerous. And mm-hmm. I think that, that's very important. Magic, by definition, should be mind-blowingly, you're altering the laws of reality and nature like that. It's like that should absolutely not be possible.
Right.
It's not... I'm drawing on the psionic forces that are inherently built into atoms and manipulating them no, it should be mind blowing, right? So,
right.
And I'm not beating up on Patrick Rothfuss at all. Don't mishear me. I love his books, but his magic. Now, I'm not talking about knowing the name of things. He's getting more into real magic there. But when he went to school, when Kavoth went to school and learned that magic there, it felt more like engineering, right? Mm-hmm. And I want my magic to be like, awe-inspiringly crazy, right?
Right.
So I was intrigued when I read that in the Kickstarter, that you're trying to go that way.
The player characters in Invisible Sun are all what we call Visle. Visla is the guardian of the Invisible Sun. That's the ninth sun that sits off the path of suns and is the source of all magic throughout this sort of
now, did I read right that Visle would be what like somebody in the shadow in the mundane world would think of as a wizard or a sorcerer?
Precisely. Yes. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. And so all player characters are Visle, and they all have access to magic. They use it in different ways because there are different, there's sort of different traditions of magic, and they are all completely different in how they go about achieving magical effects. Because they tap on different forces. There are also apostates who don't believe in any of the houses of those paths and choose their own path. But yeah, so everybody is tapping into this, and everybody's doing it, and they're doing it in different ways, which I think also contributes to the sense that it's magical, right? That there are different methodologies, and some are more rigid and some are more free flowing, but they all allow you to just, like you say, it's not about a second set of physical laws that most people don't have access to. It's about something that's outside of the physical laws.
Right.
And so in Invisible Sun, it ties very much into the structure of reality that when you make changes magically, you are actually affecting reality.
Okay, and that's very cool. And that's, if anyone goes and reads the Kickstarter or watches the intro video, they'll get the point. How surreal that it can be, and outside the boundaries of normal kind of RPG settings. Now, right. I did notice, I think, by watching the gameplay video that's also on the Kickstarter, where Monte Cook Games employees are actually showing some game examples. It appears that there's incantations, which are like one-time use. I don't know if that's a one-to-one comparison to a cipher from Numenera, but it does sound like you can just use it one time. And then there's spells, which I guess are more like they've learned the spell. They've discovered the secret to that spell, and so they can use it whenever they want.
Well, like I said, there's different orders, and they go about things differently. So, not to go too far afield from your original question, but the Kickstarter campaign itself has also got a lot of unique elements to it, and one of them is that we have a different update every day that goes up at midnight at Eastern time at the beginning of that day, and it talks about a particular topic. So we've covered like the different orders, and we're going through the different suns on the night side path and the path and the path of suns and the night side path, and so we've gone a little bit. So if somebody's curious about this and they go to the Kickstarter and they want to learn more, going through the updates, you're not going to read an awful lot of stuff about, hey, we hit a stretch goal, or this cool thing.
Right.
It tends to actually, there's lots and lots of game information embedded in there. So anyway, to your question, yeah, there are different orders, and so they go about it different ways. And so the Order of the Advances, for example, work in a sort of a very rigid way, where they literally do kind of in the Jack Vancian sort of way memorize specific spells that have to be fit into their brain in certain ways, and so they actually have cards that represent the spells with different shapes to the cards, and they fill up a thing on the table that represents sort of their brain, if you will, of where they can put magic. And so that's probably I shouldn't say probably, it is by far the most rigid methodology for creating magic. But you also have characters that are makers and shapers and weavers who bring in magic together in very, very free-form ways. And so you have these different approaches.
Okay, so that leads into, when you're talking about different types of characters, the Kickstarter mentions, it says no character concept is refused. Now, I've never, maybe GURPS kind of will state that, but even then, GURPS will restrict it to the technology level and the genre and stuff like that. So help me understand this. This is in a game where everything is possible. It's never a matter of you can't do that, but how do you go about discovering the secret to do that? Help me understand what that means, if you would.
So, I mean, that's the thing, is the actuality is sort of, I don't know how to say this. It's almost like a platonic ideal of reality, if you will. It is something that is more real than our world, and it also contains everything that exists in our world is basically in a way a shadow of something that exists elsewhere in the actuality. And then remember I said that this defies the elevator pitch, right?
Sure.
The Path of Suns is a physical map, if you will, that shows how these different domains, these different planes of existence, if you want to call it that, but that's not a perfect metaphor, how they connect to one another, how you can move between one and the other. But it is also a map of the soul. It also, traces the progression of existence for humans and for everything, from birth to death to rebirth, and all of these things are steeped in metaphor. And so when something exists, it exists as a literal thing, but it also exists as a representation of something. So in that sense, it would be almost impossible to refuse a character concept, right? Because everything that can exist exists somewhere in the world of Invisible Suns, if you will. And it may or may not be 100% literal, but it does exist.
Okay. So with all that, talking about the different ways to do characters, there's really the only limit to the character concepts or the imagination. And it does mention in the Kickstarter that this game is for people who want to really get into the game, and really get into it.
Yeah. So when earlier on you said explain it, and I started saying, well, there's three things. So that actually takes us to one of the other things too, which is the style of play, and another thing that Monte really wanted to address, which is, how do we make it work in the modern world, right?
Right.
So
hold that thought. We got to take another break. I was actually going to lead to that after the break anyway.
All right.
So hold that thought, but I do want to ask you, how complex or how long does it take to make a character in this game, given everything that we just talked about? What's that?
You want me to come back to that?
Let's address that now, and then we'll talk about the challenges of the modern world after the break.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. So in this game, in many games, you sit down. Sometimes you sit down all together and you rip out some pre-generated characters and you just play, or you can play a Cypher system game and make your characters in 15 minutes and just play. But in many games, we sit down and we end up using the first session to make characters. That is actually something that is formalized in Invisible Sun. Your first session is to make characters. So how long does it take to make a character? It takes your first session, whether that's an hour or 4 hours.
So there's
but it's
a
also
narrative.
super important that this is also a game about developing those characters. When you make your character, it's a group activity. Other players will have some input into some aspects of things around your character. They're not going to define your character, but they're going to define many of the things that affect your character. But you will make your character will change in ways that go beyond just advancing stats and things throughout the course of the game.
Okay, so building a character in this game is not a point system or just rolling dice for attributes. It sounds like there's a pretty serious narrative element to it.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, given what I understand about Monte Cook and the games that your company's putting out, that does not surprise me at all. He's heavy into, narrative and role playing, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's super cool. So like I said, I've never, there's stuff that's different about this game that we haven't even gotten into and probably won't, so people really need to go check out this Kickstarter for Invisible Sun. When we come back, I do want to talk about how you're innovating the game to help people play with the challenges of the modern world. First, I'm going to give some love to one of my sponsors, Game Goblins. And people, this weekend at Game Goblins, they are having a Labor Day weekend sale. There's extra savings on games. There's 20% off nearly everything in the store. And there's 3 for $10 Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon booster packs. And there's a buy one, get one free on Force of Will booster packs. So just want to make sure that you know that that's going on this weekend at Game Goblins, in addition to the normal things I share. So some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. For all of your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 more. And I'm pretty sure that has to be you can't combine that with the sale that's going on this weekend, but you could ask them. Maybe they'll let you. But anyway, mention Shane Plays. You'll receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more if you're a first-time customers. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Tell them Shane Plays sent you.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net.
The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate Battle of the Galaxies. Grab your slot today for the only online game where tactics and strategy still reign supreme. Visit megawars.net and get options only available in our special pre-sales previews running now.
Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm joined by Charles Ryan, COO of Monte Games, and we're talking about their innovative, just really almost genre redefining Invisible Sun RPG. Before the break, we'd said we're going to talk about how they are designing this game to help with the challenges of the modern world. People getting, missing players, that sort of thing. People, hey, I can't make it tonight or whatever. So go ahead, Charles. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you would, sir. You still there? I don't have Charles. I can't hear him. Hold on a second.
So sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
Muted, so I wouldn't put it.
Yeah, no problem. I was looking at Zach, and Zach was like, "You've got him." No problem.
Really sorry. I got a creaky
no
chin,
problem.
so I didn't want to creep on top of your promotion.
If we don't have at least one moment of panic per show, it's not Shane Plays Radio. So don't worry about it. Anyway, yeah. So what are you guys doing with this game that's unique to address the challenges of people not being able to make it or just the dynamics of modern life?
Okay, before I do that, I want to say one thing really quickly. You left off recommending people go have a look at the Kickstarter page. I do recommend, we had so much to say about this game. There's a lot of stuff that's not on the Kickstarter page. So if you scroll down near the bottom, there's a whole bunch of links to articles that we have written that address a lot of these sort of things. So check those out too if you go to the Kickstarter page with questions following this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there any, I was going to ask anyway, it's a good point, or this is a good time to do it. Is there something that y'all haven't been able to talk about in interviews yet that you wanted to make sure to talk about? If you want to, throw that out as well. If you're like, man, nobody's asking about this part of it, but we want to talk about it, feel free to throw that out there.
There's so much to talk about with this campaign. There's so many things, and we we have done, particularly Monte, but all of us to one extent or another, have done a bunch of interviews talking about it and addressing these things. We still get lots of people saying, wow, you guys aren't telling us anything. It's oh my God, we've said more about
it is such a unique RPG. Yeah, it's so unique. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so talking about the aspects of sort of dealing with modern life and the fact that we were all busy and you sit down to schedule a game and can't do it this Friday. Oh, well, next Friday I've got this thing and blah blah blah. And it's so hard to bring people together. Invisible Sun is. I don't want to mislead anybody on this point. It is absolutely a traditional game where the primary way of playing that we intend you to have is around the game table with your friends. And in that scenario, you have two modes of gameplay, which we all recognize. This is nothing innovative. You have that sort of turn by turn. We're in combat, we're on initiative. People are going through and explaining exactly what they're doing. That sort of mode of play is very detailed. You have a much more free-form sort of exploratory mode that you might be doing while your characters are in town or traveling through the wilderness or figuring out a puzzle or doing whatever it is that you're going to do in your particular campaign. But we have added this third mode that we call development mode. And this is going to let you take your game sort of offline or away from the game table and allow it to continue moving. And whether that is, the fact that you're playing with most of your players, work at the same place and you're going to chatter about the game in the lunchroom, at work, half the time, over the course of the week between game sessions, or whether that's one player wanting to work on some backstory of their character and interact with the GM, or whether that's two players together without the GM talking about something. There's all kinds of different ways that this can take form, but it is facilitated through the mechanics of the game. It is also facilitated through an app, so that you typically in this mode of play, you usually aren't having to actually roll dice. It's usually more talking generally about things that happen, but that can be guided by the Sooth deck, which is one of the key components of how things move in the game. So the app will give you a Sooth deck. It will give you the opportunity to be able to chat with other players or with the GMs about things, and so on and so forth. So whether you're just sitting around in the evening and you want to work on something in the backstory of your character, or you actually want to see if you can address some issue that came up in Friday night's game that you can work on and maybe work on a flashback scene or something like that with the GM, and then you come to the table the following Friday and you actually have new information and new things. The game is built around accommodating that, actually not even accommodating that, integrating that.
It's very integrated.
Part of the game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gameplay example on the Kickstarter page towards the bottom of the YouTube video, I think, and it shows all that. The core game is just what you would imagine.
Right.
It's a role-playing game at the tabletop. You got the game master and you have the players and all of that. And then it shows the example that one of the players, after the game is over, after the session, because the game never really ends, but after that session's over, sends a message to the game master with an app. They talk a little bit, and then they meet at a coffee shop for 30 minutes and have a solo interaction that becomes a flashback that adds to that character's knowledge the next time everybody gets together.
And then the game also has built-in mechanisms for how you can deal with a character that that isn't there this week, who was there in the middle of a scene last week.
Right.
And none of these things on their own, to be perfectly honest, are like amazingly great innovations. But the way the game brings them all together and makes them a part of how the narrative is supposed to work, I think is what is cool about it. It's sort of.
I just want to say the word gestalt. So it's a gestalt.
Yeah.
It's a good gestalt of things. Well, let me ask you this real quick. We got about 3 minutes left. Radio always goes so quick. I've never seen a game with this material structure before. So you've got the big black cube.
Yes.
And then you have, let's see, you have a game board, 4 books to describe the game and setting, over 1,000 spell cards, item cards, hundreds of gameplay tokens, dice, a cloth map, poster map, handouts, character booklets, grimoires, and more. There's medallions representing the suns. Depending on the day that you support the Kickstarter, you get a secret that's unique to that day that other people who back the Kickstarter may not get. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on here. But I have to ask you, were you surprised? Because the base rate for the basic black cube that has everything in it is $197. Mm-hmm. Now, most people are going to go $197, but if you buy the 3 basic books for D&D, that's $150. So, and you get a whole lot more than just 3 books. Okay. So, but I guess the thing is you've got to buy it all at once because it all works together. Were you afraid that you would have pushback on that price point? Were you happy when the Kickstarter funded as quickly as it did? I mean, were y'all worried like, hey, people just aren't going to buy into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we were terrified of that. I mean, but that is the great thing about Kickstarter, right? Like to bring this product to market conventional means, like you could never take a risk like that through conventional means.
Right, because you got to produce it all beforehand. You don't know what customer demand is yet.
Right. And you will inevitably, like I said at the beginning, this was an opportunity for us to make exactly the product we wanted to make, exactly the product that Monte thought would give the experience that he wants to give to the players. And you would inevitably cut those corners for a product going straight to a commercial product. So yeah, absolutely, it was a concern for us. We were worried, and we were very gratified to see the response. And we know that this is not necessarily a game for everybody, right? Based on its setting.
Well, the Kickstarter says that. The Kickstarter says, A, this may not be for you due to the setting and the immersion that it requires. And B, you might want to go in as a group and buy this, because most people usually expect the DM to buy everything or the GM. So it suggests that more than once is like this might be a good group game to invest in. Yeah. So, I'm blown away. I wish I could talk to you longer. I think that you're going to have a pretty hardcore following on this game. We'll wait and see how much it penetrates into the mainstream role playing, but I have no doubt you're going to have a hardcore fan base on this game because it's going to appeal to people on a very deep level, and especially people that like narrative games that have deep role playing. This, they're going to love this. So anyway, hey, Charles, we gotta wrap. I've got to go here in about 15 seconds. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Thanks so much for coming on. You've already funded. So now it's just how far will you fund? So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when Invisible Sun drops into people's hands. So anyway, Charles, thanks so much for being on, and we will catch everybody else next week on Shane Plays Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.